Hi there, everybody. I'm so excited to be hanging out with you today. So I'm just waiting. We have a special guest, and let me tell you a little bit about her before she joins us. Her name is Nicole Jardim, as you can see, and she is one of our Women's Health Coach certification graduates. And I'm so excited because she just launched her first book, baby. And if you have ever considered writing a book or ever written a book, then you know how challenging it is to write a book, especially one as really insightful as this book and as referenced. Okay, I know a lot of people in our community are big nerds, just like me, and this book has, so it's got tons of references for every chapter, like 60 to 90 references per chapter. So here is the giant reference list for the nerds in our community. We've got an index, which makes it easier to navigate, because here's the other thing I know. The other thing, hi everybody, great to have you guys on. The other thing I know about books, having written one, hey there, Pelvic Yogi, I can't wait to share this book with you guys, because having written a book, I know that nobody reads it. So I want you to know where they don't read the whole thing. And I mean, hey, how many of us have so many books on our nightstand and didn't read it? This is one worth reading, but even if you don't have time to get through the whole thing, the index is very detailed. So this is good for your clinic, so that you're like, okay, I need to look up how menstrual health, how fertility awareness method is going to help someone in my practice improve their menstrual health. Okay, easy peasy. You look it up in the index. All right, so today we're going to be joined in just a few minutes by Nicole Jardim. She's our WHC grad. She's the author of Fix Your Period. And the book just launched yesterday in the US. You can get it on Amazon right now, Barnes & Noble. I'll ask her if there's any particular booksellers we might want to focus on. Hey there, Chelsea. Good to have you. Hi, Carolina. So, okay, my 16-year-old loves this cover because she's dealing with a lot of her friends and herself struggling with all of these issues of periods that come as early as our teen years. And it's just such a cute, kind of accessible thing. This is a great book to recommend to your clients. Bloating. My uterus is trying to kill me. That is not a good sign. If anyone's uterus is trying to kill them, that is not a good sign. You need your pelvic pain assessed. Okay, what else is on here? Hormonal imbalances. Period is missing. Oh, I love this section. You know, a lot of people think that skipping periods, going on birth control to have less often periods, having your periods be lighter, easier, is not always a good thing, especially when we want to focus on fertility optimization, but also hormone and progesterone optimization to keep you healthy, not just during the reproductive years, but well beyond. Hormone suppression in our youth is not good for our brain, for our cardiovascular system, for our bones. So that's important. So missing cycles and being on hormonal birth control to suppress cycles for a long time is a terrible idea. The other good thing about this book is that it's got kind of a step-by-step approach and a lot of cute images to really help explain. Oh, here's Nicole now. I'm going to have her join us. Great. She's coming. So these cute images. Oh, there she is. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, you're so cute. You're like, there's some cute images, and I'm just cracking up over here.
There are, because, you know, these are cute images, but they explain complicated concepts. And you know, if we want 16-year-olds like my daughter to read this book, if we want college students to read this book, if we want women in their 20s and 30s or postpartum moms who are exhausted, we need some cute images.
Me too. I agree. I know. my friend yesterday said to me, she was showing it to her daughter and she says, does it have pictures in it? And she's 4, so, you know, it's not a big deal, but she was like, this is boring, Mom. So we're not quite that young, but
right.
yeah,
Maybe not 4. Right. But, you know, 9, 10, 11, maybe not the book for them, but this is, I think, a good guide for moms of, you know, tweens, young teenagers who are going to be just starting their period journey.
Oh yeah, the youngins.
By the way, my hair is a little bit of a hot mess today because I have been running like a crazy person. Also, today has been just crazy busy. And like most people here, just ignore the fact that I haven't had a haircut since like, God knows when, Christmas of last year.
It's such a joke. My sister and I went and got our hair done right before everything got shut down.
Lucky.
And I was like, miraculous. But that was like 6 weeks ago. And, you know, I don't know. Thankfully, I blow dried my hair to try and look good for everyone. But yeah.
Great. Well, you look great. Welcome.
Thanks.
I'm sorry I look like a bit of a hot mess today.
You don't
That's
at
not
all.
my normal.
You don't at all. I would never have thought that. You look great. It's like it's like the pandemic chic. It's just what we all got going on right now.
It's true. Pandemic chic. I'll take it. All right. So Nicole, moving away from my hair, which is not on the cute cover of this book. And we were talking about how, before you joined us, I was talking about how what I really like about this book is it's so accessible and it's so easy for clinicians to get, because here's the problem. Most of us don't read books. We buy them, but clinicians do read them with such a useful index. Like I was telling people some of the things, you know, you could be looking up when you need it, because I realized that you don't have time to read everything, but this is a resource. And, you know, we have so many people who are female athletes who are thinking it's such a great idea to just skip their periods, be on birth control forever, have light periods, you know, so you have this part and period is MIA. You know, that sounds great when you're like 20 and you're an athlete, or 17 and you're an athlete, but then it catches up to you. So talk a little bit about why, you know, how you addressed so many period topics in this and how people can use it, because it's everything. It's, you know, when you have serious PMS symptoms, it's when you have painful periods, it's when you have hemorrhaging kind of bleeding, or when the bleeding is too light, when the bleeding is irregular. And I love that, because I think, as we've talked about with our friends in the past, if you think of the menstrual cycle as that 5th vital sign, anything that's wrong with it is a red flag. So tell me what your thought process was in that sense.
Yeah, you know, I love this because you know, and I know you know this, I've had so many women over the years say to me that they're so unique and they have these really complicated issues with their periods or their hormones, and, you know, their doctor's never seen it before, or they're just so, you know, it's like nobody has ever experienced what they're experiencing. And I'm definitely not taking away from that, because I agree that when we're having these problems with our bodies, you know, they're unique to us. But for the most part, they're caused by the same imbalances of the same hormones. And so that's really where I wanted to try and simplify things for people, so that, yes, you might be experiencing certain symptoms that maybe your friend isn't experiencing, and they have different symptoms, but at the same time, they come from the same root cause. And so I broke down the hormonal hierarchy. And I kind of just made that up, but that's in chapter 3, where I'm talking through the fact that, you know, cortisol, insulin, they're both these 2 hormones that are kind of like the queen bee hormones, and they really can wreak total havoc on all of their downstream hormones. So pregnenolone, DHEA, and then all of our sex hormones. And so I figured if I could simplify it that way, then people would understand that, you know, hormones are the problem, but they're also the solution. Yeah, there it is, the turd system.
Another cute picture. Yeah,
right? I know.
Go ahead.
I know, my designer she's very cutesy. she broke it all down really well. So I feel like if we can just understand that there are just a few hormones that are causing so many problems downstream, then let's not spot treat the downstream hormone problems. Let's start at the very top. And that was sort of my thought process in all of this.
Yes. And so that it lets you address, no matter what the presenting symptom is, you're starting with this hierarchy. And I'm not like, actually, I'm not at all making fun of the fact that these are cute images. I think that's real benefit because it simplifies and gives a tool for us to explain this to our clients. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got like this chart of like hormone biochemistry that I've had on my wall for like 6 years now. And no one wants to look at that. It's super confusing.
I know,
And
right?
they're like, what is that word? It's
I know.
19 letters long. So this is good. And someone just sent us a little comment saying that she's one of our coach students and she's so excited. She just bought the book in Spain. So it is in Spain. So you guys get this book. It's available now. Where, Nicole?
Yeah, so it's available in the US and Canada as of yesterday, and then in the UK tomorrow, and anywhere that Amazon is, really. So I feel like there are many European countries, and then Australia, India, and possibly a few others. And then, you know, Kindle and iBooks and stuff. So that really can, I think, be everywhere, hopefully.
And so the best place is Amazon right now or something like that, or like online
Amazon,
Barnes and Noble?
Yeah, Barnes and Noble, iBooks. Yeah, those are the sort of the bigger ones. You know, Books a Million. Yeah, all of those. And Amazon has it on sale slightly right now too, which is kind of nice for everybody.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And, you know, I like that we can support smaller booksellers. I know there are some of those kind of online sites, and that actually might get you your book faster because Amazon, I know at least for a while, was prioritizing other sort of, I don't know, toilet paper and whatever right now.
Yes. Non-essential items are not essential.
Yeah.
But so, that's true. It's a really good point, and I didn't say that, and it's true. Bookshop.org, indie books, highly recommend going there. Lots of shops are actually doing delivery, or they're just doing like you can pick up from the store once you order. So that's
like curbside.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be curbside now.
I know.
Telehealth and curbside is going to be the new trend forever.
It's great. I know. It's our world. What is happening, Jess?
I know. I was talking to my neighbor the other day and we're like, you know, a lot of things probably aren't going to totally go back because we're getting used to this lovely whole curbside thing. I haven't left my house in like 6 solid weeks. So, and I'm pretty comfortable with that. So, and I'm kind of an extroverted person, but you know, you get comfortable like this. So anyway,
I do.
Well, for all of you guys who are here, please ask some questions to Nicole in the chat. And in the meantime, I have some questions for you. So what is kind of the most, you know, most of our followers here are clinicians and coaches who work with clients with tons of different menstrual health challenges. So what are some of the most useful kind of pieces of this book that they could use to support their coaching or clinical practices?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it really comes down to the foundational side of things. And, you know, we've talked about this for years on end, but what I find is that we tend towards just taking a bunch of supplements, and, you know, we all end up with that supplement graveyard that's so useful. And I find that if we're able to just go back a few steps and start with, you know, the food side of things. So that's what I started with in chapter 1, feed your hormones. And from there, you know, getting people to do simple things that, you know, I've always sort of made the mistake, at least back in the day, of just dumping a whole bunch of things on people because that's what I felt they needed to just have. They need to have the whole kitchen sink. And of course, I realized pretty quickly that that was not going to work at all. And people were just like, Nicole, I can't do this. I'm so overwhelmed. Stop. So I think that that's a tendency for many of us, especially if we're new clinicians. And so, yeah, like starting with the basics of food and then moving into blood sugar. And like, I really wanted to help people understand blood sugar. So I showed them in the book, this is how you prick your finger. These are the times you prick your finger. This is kind of what you're looking for with the blood sugar. This is what you're aiming for with the results. So that to me, I feel like those two are the most important things in addition to tracking one cycle. Oh my God. I mean, like, you know we know this, like how many women say to us in their 30s, 40s, 50s, I never knew this. I never knew that I ovulated and that lasted for 48 hours max and that's the end of it. And yet here we are, you know, with this like serious lack of body literacy. And so that to me was one of the key components. I put that into the very beginning of the book where I was explaining to women what they're looking for and why they're looking for these things. Because your basal temperature can tell you all this amazing stuff. It can tell you you've ovulated. It can tell you when you're pregnant. It can tell you if you have low progesterone or low thyroid function even. I mean, obviously you need testing to get that confirmed, but these are really great little biohacking tools that we can just start on our own. And it, to me, it creates a sort of a sense of control over our bodies that we likely don't have or are missing in our conventional medical care.
Absolutely. And I think that those, even just those two tools, blood sugar assessment on your own with simple tools you can get at CVS or online now, you know, at drugstores or wherever, that helps you. It's like, as you said, it's in the hierarchy, it's the foundation. So if you understand how to track that in your own body, and you can support your clients to do it, because sometimes they're just afraid. And then if they have someone saying like, okay, track this one thing, and then tracking your menstrual cycle and knowing how long it normally is, knowing how heavy it normally is, just knowing if things have changed. You know, a lot of times people, I mean, you know, I was the same way. I really have no idea what my cycle was doing. I mean, at least through my first baby, at least. You know?
Incredible. Yes. Yeah. How many women have said that to you? Like, I've had 3 children and I still have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about this until at least, you know, 14, 15 years ago. But that was, I was menstruating since I was like 16, which was actually kind of late. There was a lot of things going on there that I could have fixed at that point, from doing 20 hours a week of heavy training when I was 65 pounds.
Yeah. Jesus, Jen.
I was so
like, wait,
small.
So you were in gymnastics, right?
Yeah. So I did gymnastics, literally 20 plus hours a week from when I was 10 or 11 until I was 17. And I was really small. I mean, really small. And, you know, but
period. At least you got a period.
Eventually. Yeah. So when I was 16, I did finally get my period, but not having that at that time was seen as a massive advantage, right?
Right.
Because you're like, how much easier could this be? And we don't have to deal with this. And then, you know, again, after that, I had mostly regular menstrual cycles. As far as I know, I wasn't tracking them at all. I had no idea. I fortunately wasn't on hormonal birth control very much at all in my life. So that was lucky. Yeah. So here's a good question. As a former gymnast myself, what are the effects of long-term later of getting a late period? So from what I understand, Nicole, 16 is kind of right on the edge of irregular in terms of primary oligomenorrhea or amenorrhea. So what are some of the long-term effects that you might be looking for in someone who's now retired from gymnastics, but might be in her late 20s, early 30s, even in perimenopause? Anything that you'd be looking for?
Yeah, you know, I would say that first of all, 16, I feel like it really is that sort of cutoff point. So if you got it around then or before, I mean, there potentially aren't any. I just think that it's more, you know, for what I've seen, and especially with more long-term birth control use during that decade, is, you know, a lot of my clients have had osteopenia, bordering osteoporosis in their 20s and early 30s. And that's been one of the biggest things I've seen. And then also too, you know, just generally low sex hormones for the most part. So low estrogen, low progesterone, and ovulatory cycles that tend to happen more often. And with that, of course, you know, low estrogen, low progesterone tends to manifest as a low sex drive, just low energy, generally speaking, low motivation, low confidence, and then, you know, brain function, like mood issues and things like that. So that's typically what I've seen. I don't know that I don't know. Is there any research? I don't know that I've come across any specific research on girls who get their periods later, not from birth control use or anything like that, but just getting them later, that have caused long-term issues. I haven't really seen anything specific.
Well, local to that time. So girls who are 15, 16, 17, kind of in that cutoff, that's a big risk factor for, and we'll address your question in 1 second about bioidentical progesterone. And I'm going to write that down because this leaves. And
that's a good question.
And then weight loss. Yes. Weight gain. So female athlete triad, or what we now call relative energy deficiency in sport. And yes, you have, essentially, you're not developing the bones. That's a big component of teenager years. Those years are when you get your bone density forever. Now, I've seen that be modified and improved a little bit later. So I don't actually buy into forever you're like stuck with those brittle bones. But there's a more weakness there, and there's long-term cardiovascular effects, because if you think about low estrogen, that makes you less insulin sensitive. So long term, if you're always kind of low estrogen and you tend to be kind of a hangry person, which I bet you address a little bit of hanger in your book, that's yeah, that's a little blood sugar instability sign. So and if you're carrying that forever, that's not a great sign. Now, if you get your period at 16, it tends to be regular, right then is a great window of opportunity to teach that person to nourish really well, to not over exercise, to get her estrogen up, to get her blood sugar stable. And then I agree with you. I think it's like if someone's been on hormonal birth control for like 1 year for a particular reason, or 6 months, there are ways to recover from any of these things. Or if you've had several, if you had a miscarriage, several miscarriages in a row, or you had a bad postpartum period, or you were breastfeeding for a while and it was hard to recover, there are challenges that I think we can recover from. It's just that fewer of those challenges or less long lasting is better. Would you agree?
Totally. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. My clients tend to be on the younger side, so haven't really seen any cardiovascular issues necessarily, or heart disease. But yeah, I mean, like, it's really interesting because I think that, the sooner you can get help and start correcting, or course correcting, then you'll start to feel better. And those issues are not so long term after all. So that, that's what I've seen, at least in my clients over the years. But it does require, definitely requires some effort. And, if you are experiencing symptoms, like, getting them addressed as soon as possible.
And I think that the nice thing, if you're, especially the younger you are, 30 and younger, early 30s and younger, it's a pretty fast recovery in a lot of cases. Would you agree?
Oh God, totally. Yeah. I know. I'm like, oh, if I could only be 22 again. It's just like, I actually joked about that in the book. I wrote something about like, like bad boyfriends and whatever, your hormones, the hormone problems can be fleeting if you just start to deal with the foundational things. And you just bounce back so well.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So someone did ask about bioidentical progesterone and being afraid of the horror stories related to weight gain. What do you have to say on that, Nicole?
I mean, I will say this, that first of all, I'm not a doctor, so I don't consider myself to be an expert on bioidentical hormones by any means, but progesterone is really interesting. I feel like you have to be really careful about when you're taking it in your cycle, depending on if you're cycling. And the other thing is too, that I found with progesterone is that I've seen this before where, like she was saying, the weight gain and other symptoms that come with progesterone dominance, I suppose you could say, is that it's stored in your fat tissue. So it can become really problematic. I've had multiple people mention to me that they took progesterone and first of all, it stopped their period because they were taking it throughout their cycle. So they weren't taking it after ovulation occurred. So that was happening, or ovulation was being suppressed. And then they had other issues like major weight gain and major mood problems. And I think we just sort of think as progesterone as this really amazing hormone, which it is, but too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And so that's been my thing with progesterone. And I always keep saying that we've got to figure out why the progesterone was low in the first place. I mean, we really don't do a great job of that. We just sort of bathe people in hormones and don't really actually figure out the root cause. And I talk about this too, about this spot treating of hormones, because as we know with the hierarchy, there's a problem upstream. So you got to figure that out. And with progesterone in particular, could it be related to your gut health? Could it be related to your liver not detoxing estrogen properly? Could it be the stress component that, that stress is suppressing ovulation and progesterone production? So it could be, it's so multifaceted that we got to dig a little bit deeper, which I know that, you know, most of the women who go through your programs really do, because that's really what you teach. It's like such a fundamental component of our work.
Yeah, I'm almost entirely against patching in the hormones. I think there are times when it's appropriate, just like there are times when medication's appropriate, when surgery is appropriate. But if we, as you said, skip the why, then you're just putting a band-aid over a bullet hole. So you're going to be dealing with side effects, and that's really what people are complaining about when they're having weight gain and excessive fatigue and sluggishness and mental health issues. You can't just patch this up. You've got to figure out why there's this underlying issue. So I agree with that completely. And most of the time, quite honestly, I used to do a lot of kind of support with, you know, recommending and looking at Dutch testing and really looking at hormone testing. I honestly find now clinically, if we get the gut right and stress and blood sugar, I love that you have people learning about their own blood sugar. Yeah. I like never, I in the last 6, 8, 10 months, I can't remember the last time I've looked at someone's hormone labs. You didn't even need to.
It just amazing.
Fixed. Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible to me. And that's the thing that, you know, but they're really hard things to do, because we live in a society that perpetually normalizes all of these problems. Like, you don't even know you have blood sugar issues because feeling hungry an hour after you eat is no big deal, or, you know, craving caffeine 3 times a day is not a problem. Dessert after dinner, no, that's totally normal. So we really have, you know, we've perpetually normalized like every aspect of our, you know, hormonal imbalances, whether it's the stress or the blood sugar or our period problems even. So we don't even know what to look for.
Well, I think that's very true. I think, you know, it's pervasive among chit chats with friends, among mothers to daughters. You know, you're crampy, that's totally normal. This hurts, that's totally normal. You're missing a day of school, that's totally normal. You're bleeding like crazy, that's normal. Everyone deals with that. None of it is normal. If you have any of these, all of these, one of these, 9 of these, none of this is normal. It's common. And there's a difference between common and normal. That's so, okay, hold on. Let's see. Oh yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Views on Provera to induce your period from secondary amenorrhea. So if you stop birth control pill, and I think she's saying, like, what do we say about using progesterone to induce, kind of get the menstrual cycle going? What do you say about that, Nicole?
Yeah, you know, I love this question because I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. I think that, you know, you can definitely try it. It's you know, they call it the progesterone test or Provera test. And I think it's really actually very helpful because it's going to tell you whether you've built up a uterine lining that can even be shed in the first place. So it can be a helpful clue as to figure out what is going on. But I really believe that when I was saying tracking your cycle, we need to be taking our basal temperature. Like I was saying before, if you're taking your temperature every day in the morning, first thing upon awakening, which is what your basal temperature is, you're gonna know whether you're ovulating or not, because your temperature, actually, I have this page pulled up right here, guys. See? You can see.
Oh, another cute image. Love it.
Another cute image. So that's an ovulatory cycle. Your temperature actually rises. The one below is an anovulatory cycle, meaning that your temperature did not rise. And so if you have this temperature rise, that is almost a guarantee that you've ovulated. So again, it's like another amazing biohacking tool that you can determine what's going on with you. And so if you are not ovulating, then yes, you can do the Provera test and see, the progesterone test and see whether you actually bleed or not. But you've got to figure out the ovulation part of things and why that's happening or not happening. And again, like what we've just been saying is, you know, these are the foundations, like what's happening with your diet. Are you even eating enough if you're not getting a period? That's like the biggest thing. I feel like unintentional undereating is a humongous problem in our society. Women are just not eating enough in many cases. And as a result, your body is so keenly attuned to that kind of stressor that it's going to stop ovulation, because that is not a life or death system in your body. It's not an essential service. I can't even believe I'm saying that, but that is basically what it is.
Right.
It's
Well,
an essential, non-essential.
right. And you might actually be eating enough like calories, but they're
Yeah.
not enough nutrients. I see this all the time as well. You know, people sort of eat 3 times a day, but they're not getting the nutrition. They're not getting, 60 to 80 grams of protein. They're not getting enough healthy fat. They're not getting enough phytonutrients. They don't have baseline. How many people just have low vitamin D, low iron, low antioxidants, low minerals? You just don't have the nutrients that you need. So I think that's a really important point. So you're essentially kicking off the bleeding, but you still have to kind of go through step by step and get the foundation back. So you're ovulating, which is really the natural way to boost your own progesterone. And
Totally.
I mean, Laura Brydon will kill you if you don't do that.
She wrote another amazing book about what
Yes.
to do with your period. Yeah, it's so true. And I think that, yeah, like the hashtag right to ovulate, it always kind of cracks me up because it's true. It's been for so long. How long have we been told, oh yeah, you could just be put on the pill and you don't have to ovulate, no big deal. And, so we don't even take it as a serious physiological event that happens in our bodies every single month. And it's the most amazing thing. And yet we're just like, no big deal. So yeah, like to wrap up for that question, I think that Provera is okay, obviously, if you want to just try and figure out what's going on, but there's so much that you can do to get yourself back on track and try and figure out what's happening with ovulation and your cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get to some of these questions, but then I have another question because I'm surrounded by teenagers right now who are just being put on the birth control pill. So what's wrong with dessert after dinner? Okay, I'll let you take that one and then I'll give my 2 cents.
I feel really bad saying this because I did have dessert after dinner last night because my book came out and I was like, I'm going to have some chocolate ice cream. Damn it. But I will. Okay, so dessert after dinner. First of all, sugar cravings after you eat usually signify something's going on. So it might mean that your blood sugar did not stay stable after you ate that meal. So something in that meal might have triggered your blood sugar to do something weird. Second, it could be something going on with your microbiome. So cravings after you eat usually are indicative of something going on with your gut. And sugar after dinner usually spikes up your blood sugar. It's not fun. So it causes sleep issues. It can cause weight gain as well. And if you don't sleep properly, you become even more insulin resistant the next day, which is also terrible. So it just sort of triggers this cascade of effects on our bodies that is not cute. And eventually that'll impact your ovaries because this high insulin, like we were saying earlier, has this downstream effect, and it can impact how your ovaries actually function and potentially have an impact on ovulation. So that's, the downstream, very simplified version of it. But I broke it all down in the book, in the chapter where I'm talking about blood sugar, because it really does have an incredible impact on our menstrual cycles that will be long-term if we don't get our blood sugar under control.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't mean you can never eat sugar, although reducing it a lot for a while until you get that blood sugar stable is probably one of the healthiest things you can do in general. Sugar deprivation, we'll talk about that in a second, but essentially you can't eat too little sugar. And I don't mean carbs, because vegetables have carbs, low glycemic fruits have carbs. You can get plenty of carbs without eating any sugar. And if you do that for a sustained period of time, then you'll rebalance, and then you can tolerate a little sugar. You having sugar, once every couple months, or, eating it after lunch. If you're going to eat sugar, eat it more in the afternoon when you're still active, exercising. Even we used to do this before I knew anything about this, kind of in that earlier part of my life. I remember we had a birthday party for Claire when she was like 2, and we knew that you could just tell that giving kids sugar was going to be a disaster. So we gave them sugar like the moment they came to the party. It was like cake first, and then we ran them around and played all the games and gave them like hamburgers or something and afterwards. And it's such a nice like blood sugar stabilizer. So feed your kids
Like this,
cake
not this.
first, then protein and fat and fiber, ideally. But even if you just give them like burgers and some sweet potato roasted or something, great. So because yeah, and especially at night, because of what you said, it's going to mess up your sleep, and that's a whole cascade. All right. So somebody said they were struggling with natural miscarriage 2 months ago. Can't get in to see their gynecologist. Obviously, we can't give you any medical advice on Instagram.
Yes.
Here's what I would suggest. Doing this foundational work is no harm to anyone. You know, getting your blood sugar stable, getting better sleep, eating more vegetables, eating healthy fats. This is a great foundation no matter what. But do try to call your gynecologist. Most people are doing telehealth appointments for these kinds of important issues. So absolutely do that. Anything else you want to add on that, Nicole?
No, I would say that too. I feel like definitely try and get an appointment. I feel like everyone's doing telehealth now. Everyone's sort of just been forced into it. It's kind of amazing. Yeah, I would certainly try and get a doctor's appointment. But I agree that, you know, people have been asking me, is this protocol great for fertility? And it's, you know, it's everything basically that Jess has taught me over the years, and is working with her clients to do the same, and what I do with my clients as well, just walking through these 6 pillars and just making sure that everything is working. Also with miscarriages too, I would say looking into your thyroid. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, and we don't even realize how our thyroids impact our menstrual cycles and our fertility, because we're never really told. Surprise. And, you know, as a result, we can have multiple miscarriages and not even realize that our thyroids are actually at play there. So I have a whole chapter on the thyroid, and I broke down how it impacts ovulation, how it impacts your fertility, how it impacts your actual basal temperature. You know, if your temperature is not high enough, then you could have a miscarriage based on that. So it really is important to make sure that the thyroid is working well. So I just say that.
Absolutely. And somebody asked, what is an optimal TSH range? I like it to be under 2.0. There's good data from that, around that, from like 2005. There's no excuse that we have these ranges out to like 4.9. It's terrible. But, and yes, so if your thyroid if your thyroid is off, if you have autoimmune hypothyroid or hypothyroid from any other cause, you know, one of the ways you can check to see if that's impacting your ovulation is do exactly what Nicole teaches. Track your cycle. Then you'll be able to see if you're ovulating. So get the book. And
Thanks.
yes, we do mean all sugars. So unfortunately, sugar is sugar. You know, tropical fruits, maple syrup, raw honey.
Kids.
So yeah, anything else that people try to sneak in there?
You know, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the things like coconut sugar, all these things that are touted as healthier versions of sugar are just sugar. And I think it's interesting because not all of us respond to sugar the way others respond to sugar. I feel like that's something to really pay attention to if you're tracking your blood sugar as well, just to see how you respond to it. So because I find that some people just cannot eat a mango, whereas others don't have that crazy spike. So it really just depends on, you know, what's going on, what your body is, your composition, it seems like. So how carb sensitive you are, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. And it might vary. There might be times when you're more or less, like if you're pregnant, if you're nursing, if you're strength training all the time, if you change your workout routine, if your sleep is better, if you moved, if your work is less stressful. So, you know, these things aren't necessarily static, which is nice to have some of those tracking and body hacking tools.
Totally. I know. And it's true. I was going to say that in the first half of your cycle, estrogen, we were saying that makes you a little bit more insulin sensitive. So if you eat sugar, then maybe try it in the first half. And it's like a good experiment actually to see how you respond in the first half versus in the second half of your cycle to the same whatever sugar, if you want to experiment. I don't know. I've done that stuff.
That's actually a really good thing to do because you'll be able to see. And what's frustrating, I don't know why this is the case, but you crave sugar more. I do understand physiologically why the case. I don't understand why the design is this way.
Like a
But
cruel
you
joke.
actually, right, you actually crave sugar more in the second half of your cycle when your estrogen is at its lower levels, which is when you can tolerate it less on average. So, and that includes wine. Everyone, sorry.
I know. Again, we're like the bearers of bad news over here.
We are.
I
You're
know.
in quarantine. You may not drink. You may not eat ice cream after dinner. You're the
Seriously,
better
I
bear
feel
than
so
this.
bad.
It's
But
not true,
honestly, it's
but
like for the greater good. It's for your
it's,
own sanity and that of your family. It really helps.
yeah. And quite honestly, right now, you want to build what we call host resilience, right? This is the pathway to not just hormonal health, but what's known as host resilience, right? So we're all in this world where we're dealing with, because this is my own opinion. Americans could surprise me, but at least in the US, I think it's very unlikely that we're going to avoid some exposure at some point to this virus or any other number of things, right? Because we're totally undisciplined, and there's
I know.
and
It's true.
it's also unsustainable. I mean, there's a level of we just can't continue to live like this because many other problems will happen. So
Yeah.
at some point, your family will likely be exposed to this. The more host resilience there is, sleep, blood sugar stability, movement, eating all the foods. I think the fact that there's like a feed your hormones, getting, like you said, undernourishment is a
Yeah.
huge problem, is what creates more resilience. Now, there are a lot of things in life we can't predict, right? Some perfectly seemingly healthy people are getting very sick from this, but for the most part,
Yeah.
it's people that have less host resilience. So while it's challenging inside of quarantine to let go of your sugar support and your alcohol support, doing that really supports hormonal health, but also general health.
Amen. I could not agree with you more. I know. I feel like it's really hard initially, but it changes dramatically. Things really improve, and when you start to feel better, sugar's always going to taste good and wine's always going to be amazing. But when you start feeling better, it's just like that to me is priceless, and you really don't want to sabotage that. At least that was my experience when I was first starting out.
Yeah, positive feedback when your body starts to feel better, when the brain fog lifts, when you're not hangry all the time, your mental health, it does give you that positive feedback. And, the sugar cravings do dissipate too, which I think is helpful to know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when your gut is happy, you're really, you just don't crave them. Or
Yeah.
sugar. It's incredible. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We can't really go into all test results, but I think, one thing that you provide here, and if you want to share any other tools, one thing that I think is most exciting about this is that kind of ability to use your self-physiologic awareness to track your cycle tracking, your blood sugar tracking, anything else that people might find in here useful for kind of physical self-awareness.
Yeah, I love that term. It's so good. Like I was saying with thyroid, because I see someone's asking about that as well, like hypothyroid preventing ovulation. Yeah, potentially it could. So that's really well laid out in week 6 of the book, where I'm talking about thyroid. And so again, like I'm explaining, the temperature ranges that you're looking for to help you, know whether your temperatures are within the normal range or not, and then to understand like if you're ovulating or not, and what that looks like, what your cervical fluid should look like. All of these, again, are biomarkers that you can be looking at for yourself to sort of determine what could be going on or what could be going wrong. And then with test results as well, like I think that this whole test results are normal thing, but you still have an absent period. I mean, Jess and I are like literally rolling our eyes right now because test results come back normal all the time. And it's super annoying because you literally are experiencing symptoms and it sucks and you feel terrible. And then you're being told, well, your test results are fine. And then you're just sort of sent on your way. And that I cannot tell you, I went through that as well. And I know you did too, Jess. And it's excruciating because it feels like gaslighting in a way, because your reality is almost being denied in a way. So yeah, like you can definitely be having problems, and those conventional tests that you're doing are coming back normal, or the tests are not being done in the right time of your cycle. Although I know you don't have a period, but that is an issue as well in many cases, or they're just not testing the right hormones as well. So, they're just not digging deep enough. So yes, like I talk a lot about this in the book, because I feel like this is a major problem that women, especially in their 20s and 30s, go through as they, embark on the fertility journey, and, whether they're having miscarriages or, whatever the symptoms they're experiencing. If they've come off the pill, for instance, there are multiple scenarios, I feel like, in that time frame that we might go to the doctor and be told this. And in fact, there is something going on. I mean,
Yeah.
celiac disease, that's another thing. That was amazing to me in the research for the book, how often celiac disease causes a period to disappear because we're not getting the nutrients that we need just to support our ovaries to function properly. It's incredible.
Right, because you can't absorb nutrients through a gut that's irritated.
Yeah.
So, and then another question here that I think is good. What if you're craving chocolate? Isn't that a sign of low magnesium? Maybe. What do you think?
Possibly. Yeah, I think so. I mean, they've said that, they have said that, whoever those people are. I've heard that over the years. And I mean, quite possibly it could be. I would try supplementing with magnesium and see what happens. But I also think too that, I don't know. I mean, if you're craving chocolate, it's sort of more just like you're craving sugar, and chocolate just happens to be your preference. Preferred delivery method.
And I think balance, one thing that most people don't eat in the Western world very often is anything bitter, right? We don't have a lot of bitter greens. Chamomile tea. There's not a culture of bitter foods. So, or like even fermented foods can be good, sauerkraut, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, I mean, certainly most people are mineral deficient. Adding some minerals is great, but try balancing those cravings with bitter foods. I think that's really helpful sometimes to stop that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I was just sort of smiling because this lady said that my seed cycling post changed her life, which is so nice. Thanks. It's such a simple thing you can add in. It really helps. It's got a lot of, those seeds have magnesium in them. So there you go.
And zinc. Yeah, there's lots of minerals in seeds. So maybe you just need more seeds. Love it. Okay. How about liver support? Yeah. So what do you say about liver support?
Oh man, those bitter greens that Jessica was just talking about, get on those. I went into detail with the liver because, again, we don't really know what our livers even do. We don't even know that they're related to hormones. So yeah, you want to be supporting the detox pathways, phase 1 and phase 2 of liver detoxification. I outlined a whole bunch of ways to do that. I have, all the lists of foods and things like that support both of the phases, because they contain specific nutrients in order to do that. So one of the best ways you can support your liver is to eat the way we've been talking about. For me, I feel like we have to start there. I mean, there are multiple supplements you can use, lots of nutrients that you can incorporate via supplements, but ultimately, I think that those are the add-on, really. Those come secondary to what you would do in terms of eating. And yeah, like the dark leafy greens, I kind of do this thing with my clients. I call it the 3x3 method. It's just a fancy way really of saying like eating, a half to 1 cup of vegetables, 3 times a day, or well, 3 of them, three half cups, 3 times a day. So really getting like 1.5 to 3 cups of veggies in each meal. And those are raw vegetables. Once you cook greens down, for instance, they're basically, there's a lot less of them. But yeah, like having that, I mean, I've had clients just bring greens into their diet, and that has completely changed their health. I mean, it's changed how their livers work. It's changed their bowel movements. They're like, oh, I can go to the bathroom once a day instead of every 5 days. So it's like these basic things I think that you can start with that then move into, taking a supplement that would support usually and Jess, I learned this from you actually, supporting phase 2 of liver detoxification before supporting phase 1, because it's sort of like a backwards effect, so to speak, because you don't want like the buildup to happen. or a bit of a like a bottleneck at phase 2. So supporting phase 2 and then supporting phase 1. So something like SGS for phase 2 and then DIM for phase 1. If you have liver detox issues.
Yeah, and certainly poop first. So
Exactly. Yeah, right. I know it's like a phase 3, phase 2, phase 1 reverse
yeah.
action.
Start with the opening. Yeah.
Yes.
Love it. Love it.
Totally.
And how does breastfeeding, what about extended breastfeeding? Do you talk anything about that for period resumption after extended breastfeeding?
Impact ovulation and period resumption after miscarriage. Okay. I don't know. I bet you might have more on that than me. I feel like what I have found with extended breastfeeding is that I don't know. I feel like women tend to just be so depleted after a certain time, and they get to the point where it might be in their best interest to stop if they are having all of these symptoms. But when you don't have a period, when you're breastfeeding, that's considered pretty normal. I think where do we get to when it's not really like the normal window? I feel like it's somewhere between, I don't know, anywhere from like 6 weeks, because you can get your period back pretty soon, all the way to like 20 months.
Yeah, well, the WHO recommendation for nursing is now even longer than it was when I was breastfeeding. So it's about 2 years. And I don't disagree with that, because breastfeeding is extremely beneficial for babies and also for moms in a lot of ways, a lot of cancer prevention, and there's a lot of benefits to it hormonally. However, I think you're exactly right, because of the society that we're breastfeeding in, and not just in the US, but obviously other countries are better at this, but there's a lot of places that aren't great at this. It's a very depleting thing to do. I mean, with my first baby, I breastfed for 14 months, but I was back at work teaching exercise classes and working with patients at about 10 weeks, which is a lot longer than even some people get. And trying to pump, and it is very physically depleting. I think that's, had I really understood, I think that's part of why I was so sick for so long after that. And I don't think, again, it's a bad thing, because there's it is very difficult to breastfeed and work and never sleep for years. So
I know. Like you said, our society is not set up for this.
I mean, one of my friends from college lives in the UK, and she had a year off, and
the dream.
It's shocking. Like, you're like, what? I worked in a maternity hospital and I had 10 weeks off.
I mean, that's long considering. I mean, I know women had to go back to work after 2 weeks.
Or 6 weeks. Yeah. 12 weeks is kind of average in the US, somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks. But you don't generally get paid, so not everyone can do that. So anyway, it's rough, because you're not sleeping for sure, even at 12 weeks. So many babies don't sleep through the night till 3, 6, 9 months. Mine was 6 years old, the first one. She was she's a lovely teenager. She sleeps all the time now, which is great. But anyway, the bottom line with that is, it's a little bit like what we were talking about with the female athletes, right? You're training, you're in school, you're in AP classes, and you're losing your period because you're not nourished enough. And what you said before about under eating, I think that's a huge problem that no one is talking about when it comes to nursing. Because even if your period comes back, but you're like really tired, like, it's just not I bet it would be fascinating to really track that period, because you might be bleeding, but it's probably not ovulating. You just haven't rebuilt what you need. It would be totally different if we were, in those kind of like communities where you have your baby and then people take care of you and people feed you like soups that are designed for postpartum. That just doesn't really happen.
I know, right? I know. You've always sort of laid out how that should look. I've heard you say that before, and I'm like, I mean, why are we not doing this? We all need to live in communes. So that's basically what needs to happen.
We do. The best investment I ever made was with my second baby. I hired a night nurse for a month-ish, or I don't even remember how long. It wasn't long
Wow.
enough
Yeah.
because I still don't remember that. Um, but, but anyway, you need, it's a very depleting thing. You actually need more calories breastfeeding than you need pregnant. So I think if you are a new nursing mom, the faster you can start this situation, even if it doesn't bring your period back, because as you said, that's kind of normal. It's fine to not have a
Yeah.
period when you're postpartum and nursing, but you'll be building a foundation so that when you stop nursing, your normal hormones will recover.
Hmm. I agree
So,
completely. I know. I love that. And so we all have to do it. I feel like I want to reiterate that ovulation, periods, and fertility are not mutually exclusive. It's all the same thing that you're feeding. The thing is that you become more fertile when you do this, and not everybody's trying to do that because they're like, wait,
right.
what do you mean? But that's
But I
just
mean,
what our minds are trying to
that's
do.
a good thing. Yeah. I mean, it's a good, healthy thing to be more fertile. You have to be aware of that. I think,
Yes.
you do have to be mindful.
Uh-huh. You definitely do.
But, there are ways to prevent pregnancy. We can deal with that if we want. So this is a
Exactly.
good, so this person asked, her 15-year-old daughter is leaning towards PCOS according to her blood work. The
Uh-huh.
doctor said that the only fix is birth control.
Insert the eye roll.
I will let you respond to this so I don't get all crazy.
Yes, I know. Seriously, right? I know. Trust me, I could get all crazy too. I've got that little angry emoji face going on right now. Wonder if the imbalance of hormones is affected by her height. Oh, I'm curious. How tall is she?
Yeah, tell us
I
how
don't,
tall she is. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
I don't know anything about height affecting hormones, so that's interesting. But I just know from my teenage years and those of the teenagers I do know currently that the tendency towards higher testosterone is, it's a real thing, and it's because your hormones are still trying to figure their things out, their way around actually at that time. And when you think about your menstrual cycle as a preteen or teenager, you've essentially gone from having a dormant, menstrual cycle. It's anovulatory. It's not doing anything to being ovulatory. And it just takes some time. In some cases, it can take multiple years to level out and for a girl to have consistent periods and not for them to not be flooding type heavy periods. And so, and the reason for that is because that little follicle on the ovary is, it can be smaller in most cases in teenagers because of the fact that their endocrine system is still trying to get its bearings. So with that, you might not produce enough progesterone. You might have heavier, even more painful periods and longer bleeding, spotting, things like that. And then also in the case of your daughter, possibly very, anovulatory cycles or very long cycles that go on for months at a time. So I would say that getting your blood sugar under control, or her blood sugar under control, would be a critical component, because we were saying before with insulin, insulin will impact how much LH is produced. And so LH rises, and that causes more estrogen, as well as, anovulatory cycles and less progesterone. So you end up in this situation or the cycle of having the feedback loop all messed up, and then not having not having a consistent period. So I don't know what her symptoms are, but oh, she's 4'10". Okay, so she's tiny. So I don't know, Jess, do you have any thoughts on height?
Yes, I think that probably we're talking about almost, as you said, premature
Right.
menstruation. And I'm getting a warning from Instagram. I didn't know it would cut us off. But
Oh,
so what I
really?
would say is she might have more time to grow if we kind of get this all in place. Because especially if she hasn't been stable at that height for a solid 2 years, there's a little more space to grow. So I would be focusing on blood sugar 100%. And, don't mask it with birth control until someone's figured out what's going on.
Yes,
Um,
completely.
all right, let's
Yeah.
see. Fix Your Period, available internationally. Someone was asking that question on
Yes.
Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, on all the booksellers. Tell me the indie books ones again.
Oh yeah, so there's bookshop.org and then indiebooks.com, I believe it is. And you can go to fixyourperiod.com just to find the booksellers. And then also I have a bunch of bonuses and resources for everyone who is on there. Actually, someone had mentioned the seed cycling. I have a brand new seed cycling guide that's on there too as part of
Fancy.
the bonuses. I know. Yeah. I can't believe there's a warning, so we have to go.
We have to go. We've actually been talking longer than Instagram's going to allow us, which has never happened to me before, but this is such a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
I know. This is such a fascinating topic. So get this book, read it for your teenagers, read it for yourself. It's great postpartum. It's great perimenopause. Without getting this foundation in place, the rest of your hormones are going to be a mess. So start here. Yes. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, everyone.
Tell me your link one more time, fixyourperiod.com.
Yeah, so fixyourperiod. Yeah, just fixyourperiod.com, everyone. So you can check it out there.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.